In a town near Seattle, a bunch of people end up stuck underwater. A brave mom uses her last breath to save her daughter. They swim up together. Sheriff Jude Ellis, who's into yoga, hears from his deputy, Nestor Rosario, about a body found on a usually empty beach. When they get there, they find more bodies and a little girl who's passed out. They save her and call for help. Later, more survivors are brought to shore by the Coast Guard and other helpers. Jude and Nestor notice the survivors don't have life jackets, which seems weird. A Homeland Security agent named Emma Wren tells Jude that the survivors are seeking asylum and haven't talked to the authorities. Jude talks to Leah, the little girl he saved. She says she and her mom were running from a future war. A mysterious man says the events Leah talks about haven't happened yet. The next day, Jude hears about a mugger in town and tells Nestor to identify the bodies in a plane hangar. On the beach, the survivors are taken care of, and a man named Caleb talks about their dangerous journey. They were trying to escape a future disaster caused by a group called Apex, who say they're the next step in human evolution. A woman named Hannah talks about how her dad helped her get past checkpoints. Their quick escape led them to a cave-like place in the early 21st century. Emma, interested in Caleb's story, asks if it involves a time machine. Caleb hints at amazing possibilities. Emma and her assistant Bryce find it hard to believe the survivors' stories, but decide to analyze their recordings. Jude's access to the case is taken away, and Emma tells him to keep quiet about the beach. Reese, Leah's mom, wakes up on a fishing boat. She's happy to be alive, but is still coughing up water. Meanwhile, Bryce brings talking points to Jude's house. Jude isn't happy with the lies and missing information and decides to call Emma to talk about his worries. Emma thinks that keeping the story quiet will help everyone. Jude doesn't agree but feels like he can't do anything. Emma goes to a private meeting to report about Apex. Hannah asks a young agent named Roy for sunglasses, saying the sun is much brighter in this time period. As the refugees think about their uncertain future, Caleb is thankful for their current situation, while a woman named Abigail doesn't like eating meat from real animals. A woman named Rebecca gives Leah a stuffed bunny, but Leah doesn't know what a rabbit is, suggesting a sad future for the natural world. Emma tells Caleb that the refugees will soon be moved to temporary housing. She talks about her own experience as an immigrant and wishes she had spoken up when she met dangerous men during her journey. A man named Thomas comes to Emma's door saying he has important information that he wants to share with the president. Emma asks for more proof before setting up such a meeting. Thomas hints that their group isn't the first to arrive. Meanwhile, Jude finds Reese in his car, pointing a gun at his head, demanding to be taken to where the bodies are kept. Jude does what she says, but stops outside because he doesn't have clearance. Reese turns off the electrical panel, causing a power outage, and checks the bodies without being seen. During a fight, Reese shows her amazing abilities, beats the security guards, and escapes. Emma and Bryce are shocked by the security video, and Jude tells Emma he's worried about Reese being there. Emma tells him not to interact with Reese if he sees her again. The refugees are taken to an old summer camp in the woods, which seems well hidden. Leah stays with Caleb and Rebecca, who happily take her in as a replacement child. Hannah has trouble with a lock, but is helped by Roy, who gives her sunglasses and tells her to say she found them if anyone asks. Emma gets a call about the injured agent, realizing how serious the Apex threat is. She and Bryce guess that there might be another Apex member at the summer camp. Lindauer agrees to meet Thomas, who says he has secret national security information. However, Lindauer reveals his connection with the previous group of time travelers, suggesting that he's been there longer than Thomas realizes. Back at home, Jude has a tense conversation with Reese, who has broken into his house. She tells him her name and that she's looking for her daughter, asking for Jude's help. Jude agrees to listen to her story and tells her to start from the beginning. Reese was an Apex, a genetically engineered super soldier. She saw regular humans called commons as lesser beings. Reese and another Apex were sent to a camp full of sick humans. They weren't scared because they were immune to the disease called the Mantals that was killing humans. This disease was created by their kind. In the camp, Reese found a baby who wasn't sick and fell in love with her. She wanted to protect the baby, so she killed her partner who wanted to kill the baby. She took the baby, Leah, home. Her husband didn't want the baby, but Reese forced him to keep it a secret. One day, her husband told their leaders everything. Reese was called into a meeting where she was asked if she had anything to confess. She said no, but then her husband came into the meeting and said the secret was going to get out. Reese realized she had been betrayed and killed everyone in the room except her husband. Reese decided to leave her husband. She packed her and Leah's things and took Leah to a transporter to time travel to a place called the Long Peace. But there was a problem with the transporter and everyone was separated. Reese was separated from Leah after she gave Leah as much oxygen as possible by kissing her. Leah was one of the 147 people who survived, but almost 400 people didn't make it. The survivors at the camp were so upset that they wanted to have a memorial for everyone they lost. They asked for permission during the DNA tests. They all had to undergo DNA tests because Homeland claimed they wanted to find out where the survivors came from. But actually, they wanted to make sure there weren't any other Apex in the group. Jude wanted to reunite Reese with Leah, but then he found out more about the Apex. He saw footage of the survivors describing the war and what the Apex did to them. This changed everything for Jude, and he led Reese into a trap where he locked her into a reinforced shed. Jude called Emma and told her that he had the Apex. He wanted Emma to come alone so they could talk to Reese and try to find a middle ground. But Emma broke her promise and told her boss where to find Reese. Reese overheard some of Jude's conversation with Emma and knew her daughter was at the old camp. She was trying to figure out how to get out of the shed when an armed SEAL team arrived and tried to kill her on sight. They shot up the boat shed and injured Reese, but she got away. Jude knew after the incident at the boat shed that he couldn't trust Emma. He asked her not to bother him anymore and tried to return to a normal life where he finally got to see his son. In the next scene, Reese manages to escape from a boathouse and recover from a gunshot wound. Meanwhile, at Craig's camp, his team is planning their next steps. They follow the trail of Reese's blood, which leads them to a store where they find a threatening message written in blood. At the police station, Jude talks to Nestor Rosario and asks him to contact him if anything happens. Nestor and Oliver have a brief chat before Jude and Oliver leave. Nestor then releases Marshall from his cell and advises him to move on. Craig frees Thomas from a room, but with the condition that he tells the other refugees to stay quiet and follow orders. A stranger threatens Hannah while she's having breakfast, which prompts her to ask Roy for help to leave the camp, but he refuses. Jude and Oliver arrive at a festival at the harbor, and although Oliver is initially disappointed because he thought they were going fishing alone, Jude convinces him to enjoy the festival. Before leaving the car, Jude sees a stuffed toy that reminds him of Reese. Reese finds herself in a forest, far from the store. She hears a strike team searching for her, and their commander instructs them to search the entire forest. Meanwhile, Roy leaves the campsite early and gets stuck in traffic. Hannah seizes the opportunity and sneaks out of the back of his truck without him noticing. Emma receives a call from Craig, who checks on Leah's condition and dismisses Emma's questions about his decision to send a strike team after Reese. While standing outside Leah's tent, Emma sees Thomas telling the refugees to follow orders and stop talking about where they came from. Dr. Sophie Forbin meets Craig at a hotel in Seattle, where he briefs her about the situation, and they immediately head to the campsite by helicopter. Reese, hiding behind a tree, takes out a soldier who found her makeshift arm sling. Dr. Forbin arrives at the campsite and meets Emma. They discuss the virus, and Emma urges Dr. Forbin to do whatever she can to save Leah. Claire talks to Marshall in his trailer and expresses her worry about an incident at Thorn Beach. She finds a large earring on the sofa. Jude and Oliver enjoy a milk booth at the festival, while Hannah wanders around, fascinated by everything she sees. She eventually meets Marshall. Emma talks to Thomas in her cabin and suspects that he lied about there being an earlier migration. Jude is at the police station for the festival, and while he's handing out toy badges and handcuffs to kids, Emma enters the room. Dr. Forbin checks on Leah and is surprised to find her condition improving. The soldiers from the strike team continue to search the jungle and find their fallen comrade. Reese attacks them one by one. Dr. Forbin talks to Rebecca about Leah, but Rebecca dismisses what Dr. Forbin has told her due to grief. Roy finds Hannah's cardigan at the back of his truck. Marshall and Hannah enjoy a band's performance, but Roy finds Hannah and apprehends her. Marshall tries to fight Roy, but Roy shows him his badge and Jude steps in to calm the situation. Reese confronts the last remaining soldier, who tries to disorient her with a device emitting a radio frequency. But Reese overcomes its effects and neutralizes him. Jude gets Oliver some ice cream, and as they eat, Oliver questions Jude about why he had to leave him. Jude reassures him that it wasn't his fault, and that he left to keep Oliver and his mom safe. Oliver accepts this as he hugs Jude. Emma tries to find out about their operation by looking at their department's website and calling their office, but she finds nothing. Roy and Hannah take a break on the highway, and he asks her why she ran away. Hannah explains that people will either hate her when she gets back, or they'll find a reason to. When Hannah returns, she finds a strange man in her cabin who threatens her. Dr. Forbin checks Leah's health and sees that the virus is almost gone. As she watches Leah sleep, Rebecca comes in and says that everyone can catch the virus except Apex. Reese drives into town using a van used by soldiers. During a fireworks show, a loud noise is heard. Jude investigates and finds a note in the mouth of Reese's last enemy that says, "Now you suffer, Sheriff." He rushes back to Oliver, but only finds his stuffed shark. Oliver is gone. Reese calls Jude and says she has Oliver, who is safe. She'll only let Oliver go if Jude brings her Leah. Jude agrees because he feels he has no choice. He tries to track them using Oliver's phone GPS, but finds only the phone in an abandoned car. They're gone. Jude goes to the camp, but the guards won't let him in. He pretends to leave, but then runs past the barrier. The guards arrest him, but Emma arrives and lets him go. Jude tells Emma about his deal with Reese. Emma reveals that Leah is very sick and contagious, so Jude can't bring her to Reese. Reese takes Oliver fishing at the lake using fishing rods borrowed from nearby fishermen. Oliver wants to call Jude, but Reese says his phone is broken and that Jude is busy looking for someone important. Emma takes Dr. Forbin to the isolation chamber to explain Leah's condition. Dr. Forbin mentions that Leah's survival for the next 2 days would be surprising due to her severe illness. Jude refuses to believe it and insists that Reese won't either. Dr. Forbin is unaware of who Reese is, so Emma asks Jude to talk outside. Jude expresses his anger and reveals everything he knows to Emma. The people in the camp are from the future. Emma's boss is terrible, and her job is to keep secrets. Emma suggests putting out an alert to find Reese, but Jude disagrees due to past events. Reese will call him in an hour, so he contemplates his next move. When Emma leaves, Jude talks to Dr. Forbin and tries to get information about Reese from her. Jude asks her to help him get Leah out of the chamber, but Dr. Forbin refuses. However, when Jude threatens to open Leah's isolation unit, she reluctantly agrees to go with him. Emma finds out they've left and calls Jude, urging him to come back before anyone gets hurt. Jude explains that if he doesn't go to Reese's location, Oliver will be in danger. Jude gives the phone to Dr. Forbin, who suggests that since Leah was treated by her mother, she can create a cure to stop the virus from spreading. Emma reluctantly agrees and instructs Jude to update her every half hour. Oliver asks Reese if she has kids while they're fishing. Reese says she has a daughter. Oliver wonders why her daughter isn't with her. Reese explains they'll meet later. Dr. Forbin talks to Jude about Reese. Some people in the camp have special abilities like strength and healing. Dr. Forbin thinks it's evolution, but Jude disagrees. Jude thinks Reese was made for fighting and is dangerous. They find Reese and explain the situation. Reese wants to see her daughter, but Jude says it's risky and she'll be imprisoned if she goes to the camp. Dr. Forbin offers to take Oliver's place as Reese's captive. He'll help her cure Leah. Jude goes home and finds Oliver, feeling relieved. Jude asks about Reese, and Oliver thinks Reese is Jude's girlfriend. Jude agrees. Later, Oliver talks to Jude about his day. Oliver suggests Jude can find someone better than Reese. Jude asks if Oliver knows anyone. Luke finds Caleb in a chapel. He notices Caleb hiding something and encourages him to be proud. Caleb doesn't want to remember his past. Luke wants Caleb's memories and asks about Hannah, but Caleb hasn't seen her. Luke gets frustrated and leaves. Hannah is in her cabin, sharpening knives. Marshall talks to his friend about his failed relationship and denies being with Claire. They talk about Hannah and the survivors in a mountain camp. Marshall's friend asks about Hannah, but Marshall doesn't know why he's looking for her. Marshall goes to the police station and talks to Nestor Rosario. He knows where the survivors are, but Nestor doesn't believe him. Hannah sharpens knives and hides one. She sees Luke outside, but Caleb stops her. Caleb talks to Hannah about Luke. Hannah used to work with the Apex. Caleb asks if Luke hurt her and leaves her in the cabin. Marshall thinks about reaching out to Hannah. His friend tries to stop him, but Marshall can't stop thinking about her. They fly a drone to the camp, but an eagle takes it, dropping the phone. Luke finds Caleb in his cabin. Caleb confronts Luke about threatening Hannah. Luke tries to convince Caleb not to believe Hannah. Caleb threatens him, but eventually lets him go. Marshall and Claire are on a date. Claire mentions finding an apartment and asks Marshall to come. Paul sees a refugee's drawing talent and asks if she can draw faces. She agrees, and Paul gives her an outline. He wants to see someone again. Paul shows the sketch to a guard and asks for facial recognition. The guard hesitates, but Paul bribes him. The guard tells Emma about Paul. Emma takes the drawing and confronts Paul. Paul reveals it's his wife in the picture. Emma decides to run the facial recognition herself. She contacts someone for help. Emma drives to Paul's wife's location. Emma meets Paul's wife. She shares that they were married without problems until Paul joined a cult. She talks about the cult claiming to be from the future. Emma asks for evidence, and Paul's wife goes to get papers. Emma finds a photo with Craig in it. Before she can react, Paul's wife shoots her with a pistol, and Emma falls down. In the next scene, Reese gets impatient with Dr. Forbin's progress and draws her own blood. Dr. Forbin is fascinated and asks questions, angering Reese. While the medicine is being made, Reese recalls her time with Leah. Dr. Forbin receives a call about Leah's worsening condition. Reese overhears and gets angry, but Dr. Forbin calms her down. Once the medicine is ready, they leave the lab and give it to Leah, who quickly recovers. Jude tries to contact Emma but gets her voicemail. Nestor gives Jude a case file with an unidentified dead person's photo that Reese brought. Jude decides to take the case. Agent Foster wants to see Jude and asks about Emma. Jude visits Emma's last known address and finds her belongings untouched. He borrows a computer from Frank and discovers information about Port support Kanan and Craig. Nestor learns the truth from Jude and forgives him. They discuss Marshall's story and its connection to the situation. Marshall's family gets into a car accident, resulting in his mother's death. Marshall wakes up confused and disturbed. He shares his realization with Nestor, but Nestor dismisses it. Marshall meets a friend at a restaurant and talks about their attempts to contact Hannah. Jerry, Marshall's father, informs him about Nestor's call and gives him money. Marshall drives to the accident site, and Claire follows. Hannah calls and Marshall hears people near her cabin. Nestor instructs Marshall to go to the police station. Jude and Nestor believe Marshall's story, and Marshall identifies the dead person in the photo. A flashback shows the accident and Craig's involvement. Craig meets Paul's wife, and they discuss their plans against Apex. Craig receives a promotion from Senator Howe. 2 years later, they learn that 47 more people have appeared. Dr. Forbin tells Rebecca that Leah has fully recovered, but she has other plans for Leah. Rebecca suspects Reese helped Leah and warns her about Apex. Dr. Forbin experiments with the cure alongside Reese. She combines it with her own blood cells and sees incredible results. She updates Reese about Leah's condition, shows her a photo of Leah, and plans to transfer Leah to a hospital for their escape. They agree on a meeting time. Reese asks Kurt Cooper for assistance in obtaining legal documents, pointing out his mafia connections. Kurt takes Reese to the mafia's hiding place and introduces her to Victor, their leader. Reese explains her needs to Victor, who initially doubts her. Reese takes down Victor's men and demands he open the bag of money. Nestor investigates a damaged ATM with missing money. Dr. Forbin meets Craig at a pier. She fabricates an explanation for Leah's cure. Craig offers assistance but informs her that her research belongs to the government. Dr. Forbin is denied entry to the camp and drives away frustrated. Reese prepares for her and Leah's journey. Dr. Forbin calls Reese with a setback, but Reese dismisses it. Dr. Forbin pleads for another blood sample to save Reese, but Reese focuses solely on saving Leah. Dr. Forbin has a heart attack while driving and loses consciousness. She wakes up in the hospital, anticipating bad news. Reese returns to Victor to purchase weapons. Caleb hears heavy machinery in the park and speaks with Agent Bryce Foster about the increased security. Marshall serenades Hannah over the phone. Caleb informs Marshall about the search by the HSI, and Gabe suggests exposing the truth about the camp. Craig receives an email from Dr. Greta Pryor containing a link to the uploaded photos. Agent Roy Aronson searches Hannah's cabin, but she hides the phone. Caleb, Hannah, and Rebecca discuss Marshall during lunch. Agent Foster confronts Caleb about the phone, but Caleb questions him instead. Caleb expresses his concerns and throws the phone into the water. Thomas finds alcohol in his cabin. Caleb confronts Thomas and breaks his knee. Jude recalls a drug raid with Sergeant Doucette and Corey Mack. Jude visits the house where the raid took place and speaks with Nestor Rosario. Jude discusses his findings about Doucette with Martin and Woodrum. Martin gathers more information about Jude's case. Jude visits his ex-wife Amy and their son Oliver. They discuss the investigation and argue about Oliver's soccer enrollment. Amy confesses she has met someone and accuses Jude of being a threat. In a flashback, Doucette visits Jude's house and offers assistance. Amy pleads with Jude to give up the case and takes Oliver to her mother's house. Martin calls Jude to inform him about a meeting arranged by one of his contacts. Martin provides him with the address. Jude goes to the location but senses that something is amiss. He notices the absence of security guards in the building and realizes that the given address is on the 3rd floor. With a gut feeling, Jude decides to leave the building. Jude waits for Martin at the cafe, reflecting on the day they lost the case. After Doucette leaves the courtroom, Jude lashes out and punches him in the face. Shortly after, Martin arrives at the cafe and hands Jude an envelope. They discuss the information gathered by Martin's contacts, fueling Jude's growing suspicion. When Martin departs, Craig calls Jude and they arrange a meeting. Nestor pulls over Craig's car and requests his license and registration. However, Craig does not have them and attempts to show his credentials instead. At that moment, Jude knocks on the other door and engages in conversation with Craig. Jude notices the smell of alcohol in the car, raising concerns. Nestor then instructs Craig to step out of the car. During a search, Jude discovers a handgun in the glove compartment with the serial numbers removed. Consequently, they arrest Craig. In the next part, finally, Leah is discharged from the infirmary. Rebecca escorts her out of the cabin, where a nurse gives Leah her forgotten rabbit stuffed toy. As they walk through the camp, the other survivors look at Leah with questioning expressions. Leah asks Rebecca about their stares, but Rebecca advises her to ignore them. Meanwhile, Craig is in the interrogation room, handcuffed. Jude brings him a cup of chocolate, and they talk. Mayor Conway arrives and demands an explanation. Jude explains the situation, and the mayor decides to talk to Craig in the interrogation room. Craig manages to convince the mayor to let the refugees visit the town. Later, Rebecca and Caleb find themselves in their cabin, where Caleb notices Rebecca's worries and engages in a conversation with her. They discuss their fears since arriving at the camp until Leah enters and informs them that she and Rebecca are on a list. They proceed to a cabin where all the refugees are gathered, confirming that Leah and Rebecca have indeed been chosen to visit the town. Caleb tries to dissuade Rebecca from going, believing it to be dangerous, but Rebecca insists and they board the bus. Outside the camp, Reese starts aiming at the camp guards. She sees a guard pick up something she remembers, Leah's toy. The guard gives the toy to Leah just before she and Rebecca get on the bus. Seeing this, Reese realizes that she needs to change her plan. On the bus, Agent Foster gives instructions to the refugees and puts tracking bracelets on them. Naomi wakes up in her bed and is surprised to see the nurse and Dr. Fleischer. She asks about a man named Eli, but learns he didn't arrive. Naomi is relieved and mentions that she has work to do. The nurse shows Naomi her new living quarters and tells her that Agent Foster is in charge of the camp. Naomi wants to talk to him, but the nurse advises her to wait. Naomi asks for markers and begins writing in a strange language on the walls of her cabin. Caleb sees this and asks to enter her cabin. Naomi lets him in and explains that Apex has marked her. Meanwhile, Nestor accompanies Marshall as they prepare to meet the refugees. Nestor tells Marshall that Hannah might be among them and assigns him as her guide. He also instructs Marshall to gather information about the camp and report back. Mayor Conway and Jude wait for the bus to arrive. When it does, Agent Foster introduces himself to the mayor, and some refugees get off the bus, including Hannah. Hannah and Marshall reunite, which makes Roy jealous. Marshall takes Hannah on a tour of the town, followed by Roy. They end up near a statue where Marshall tells a story about vandalizing it. Hannah finds it amusing, but Roy doesn't. They walk towards the shoreline, where Marshall expresses his pain about their situation and convinces Hannah to run away with him. They kiss and then board a boat to the other side of the shore. Marshall and Hannah talk about their past experiences, including Hannah's first heartbreak with someone named Micah. Marshall decides to visit the liquor store. Nestor finds Marshall drinking at a table and asks about his findings. Marshall says it was all a mistake and leaves. Hannah encounters an old man selling trinkets who notices her sadness. She finds her locket among the items, but leaves without paying. Roy pulls her away from the old man, who still has the locket. Roy buys the locket and finds Marshall's face inside. Leah and Rebecca get off the bus, and Jude offers to be their guide. They explore the town together, and Jude asks Rebecca about the camp. Rebecca hesitates at first, but eventually opens up. They visit a souvenir shop where Leah receives a card with a strange language written on it. They go to a playground, and Jude helps Leah swing. Reese watches from a distance. When they reach a landmark indicated on the card, Leah goes to the bathroom. Reese takes Leah out through the roof access, and Jude helps her remove her tracking bracelet. Afterward, Leah embraces Jude, and they bid each other farewell, reminding each other to be cautious. Rebecca observes Leah in the car as it drives away, and she confronts Jude, stating that he has made a grave mistake. Jude disagrees, asserting that Leah is in the safest place she could be. Following their escape from the group of refugees, they prepare to leave the town and head to a motel. However, Reese senses something amiss with Leah's toy and discovers that it has been rigged with a tracking device. They hastily enter their car and speed away from the motel. Back at the police station, Nestor hands Jude a flyer regarding a meeting concerning the identity of the refugees, leading him to suspect that Leah and Reese's escape was too easy. Reese drives as fast as she can, but then her car tires burst. A strike team starts to attack her. One of the men grabs Leah, and the men eventually knock Reese out. Craig tells someone on the phone that they've captured their target. Reese is on a mission with a fellow soldier when she sees a picture of Jude's son. She enters a house and has memories from the past. It is revealed that she is tied to an operating table under Craig and a doctor's supervision. The doctor checks on Reese, but receives no response. Greta insists on proceeding with the operation, but the doctor explains that extracting Reese's DNA would kill her. Craig suggests a plan to wake Reese up with Dr. Forbin's help. Dr. Forbin agrees, and they head to the camp. Dr. Forbin is surprised by Reese's living conditions, but Craig insists on taking precautions. The doctor communicates with Reese in her mind, and Reese wakes up asking for Leah. Reese warns Dr. Forbin about Craig's true motives and advises against moving forward. Dr. Forbin promises to come back for her. Before leaving, Craig searches Dr. Forbin's bag, but finds nothing. Dr. Forbin leaves with a sample of Reese's blood. Paul leaves his cabin and encounters Roy, who is standing guard. Paul asks about Emma, who who has been missing for 10 days. Roy assures him that she is on sick leave and will return soon. Paul then leaves the area. Meanwhile, the residents gather at the pub, demanding answers from Jude, Nestor, and Mayor Conway about the camp. Gabe riles up the crowd, and they prepare to attack the camp. Jude leaves Nestor in charge and goes to the camp to warn Agent Foster. Gabe informs Marshall about their plan, but Marshall dismisses it. Jude arrives at the camp and shows Agent Foster something. Nestor tries to control the crowd and eventually arrests some of the locals. Nestor reveals what Jude discovered and asks the crowd to disperse. That night, Nestor talks to the last prisoner and then meets with Jude. Jude shows Nestor the keys that will help locate Emma. Gabe informs Marshall about the events, and Roy visits Marshall with Hannah's locket. Rebecca talks to Caleb about the loss of their daughter. Caleb comforts her, and Rebecca follows Naomi into her cabin. Rebecca talks to Naomi about her daughter Rachel, and they discuss a mission. Hannah finds Roy outside her cabin, and they have a conversation. Jude notices that everyone has been moved, and Agent Foster takes him to a site where a dead body is found. Jude searches the body's pockets and finds Emma's car keys. The HSI agents search the cabins and find Emma's missing gun in a locker. Paul is arrested, and Jude gives him a calling card for assistance. Agent Foster talks to Craig on the phone. Craig orders him to escort Jude out of the camp. Agent Foster tries to explain that involving Jude would be suspicious, but Craig insists on his orders. Jude is not surprised and leaves alone. While Caleb is sleeping, Rebecca leaves their cabin to go to Naomi's cottage. She finds other survivors there and is welcomed by Naomi. Meanwhile, Martin gives Jude the data from Emma's keys. Paul is kept waiting in a room until Greta, his wife, whom he calls Eve, enters. He breaks down but regains his composure. They discuss what has happened to them, and Greta tells Paul about a new mission where she needs his help. Greta gives Paul a script to read while she prepares to film him. She explains the importance of their actions, and Paul reluctantly agrees. Greta takes Paul to the pier, where he is amazed by the surroundings. He asks when he will meet the others, who came with Greta, and criticizes people who are always on their smartphones. Later, Greta shows Craig the video of Paul. Craig asks if there is another option, but Greta believes this is the best way to cover up what happened on the beach. The story then goes back to events before the second migration in 2194. Grace and Diana call for help, and a large crowd gathers in front of the portal. Reese warns them about an imminent threat from Apex. An explosion causes panic, and people try to find safety in the long piece. Rebecca talks with Naomi about her daughter being taken by Apex. Agent Bryce Foster meets with his team to prepare for another attack. Caleb and other survivors notice graffiti being covered up. Naomi tells Agent Foster about an upcoming earthquake in Cuba. Caleb confronts Naomi about associating with his wife, Rebecca. Hannah apologizes to Roy and gives him flowers. Caleb tries to get Rebecca to talk about their loss. Agent Foster refuses Naomi's bribe. Caleb writes an apology note to Rebecca. Agent Foster stops Naomi and the survivors from leaving the camp. A gunshot is heard, and Agent Foster is found bleeding. Jude and Nestor find Mary, who reveals her real name is Diana. They talk to Diana about the second migration and the rise of the Apex. Jude shows Diana photos of the suspects, and she recognizes Noah and Eve. Jude tells Diana about the tape and the danger they face. Deputy Rollins informs Jude about FBI agent Jennifer Doyle, who is part of the earlier migration. Jude stalls Jennifer, and Diana sees her. Jennifer asks for recordings and documents, but Jude insists on following proper procedure. Jennifer leaves the police station. Paul questions his situation and contacts Jude. Jude learns about the recordings and the danger the survivors face. Jude and Nestor talk to Diana about the second migration and the contraption she was making. Jude tells Diana about the unusual snow in the mountains. Diana asks how they can stop the members of the earlier migration. Inside Marshall's RV, Jude and Diana discuss their options. Diana proposes a solution to make them hidden, and Marshall agrees to help. Jude decides to proceed with this plan, and Nestor keeps Diana's first device in the evidence lockup. Craig says goodnight to Rachel, who is working on her assignment. Rachel has the mark given by the Apex on her shoulder, just like Naomi does. Craig Lindauer and Greta Pryor start their plan. Craig manages the camp while Greta goes home to her husband, Paul. Craig brings Leah with him, who meets Caleb, a man mourning his missing wife, Rebecca. Craig plans to free the survivors but needs to finalize documents and distribute vaccines. Greta gives Paul new legal documents, but he's not happy about it. Craig learns from Caleb that Apex kidnapped Naomi and Rachel, who he thought was his adopted daughter, is actually Caleb and Rebecca's daughter. Greta takes Paul to their son's piano recital, which leaves him speechless. They celebrate their son's life at home, but the mood changes when Greta plays a recorded conversation between Paul and Jude, revealing Paul as a traitor. Paul Paul dies from poisoned wine. Greta informs Craig of Paul's death, caused by a chemical they created to kill the refugees. Mason Spencer continues Sophie's work on an antidote made from Reese's blood. Sophie decides to use the antidote, believing she has no other options. Inside Jude's garage, Marshall talks to Diana as she finishes working on the device. Jude enters with one of the necessary items, but their conversation is interrupted by a noise outside. Jude investigates and finds Sophie, who pleads for his help. Jude is surprised to find Sophie outside his garage and disappointed that she didn't tell him she knew where Reese was. When Nestor arrives, Jude suggests getting Reese's help. Reese has visions of her daughter and calls out Leah's name. Vivek, who monitors Reese's condition, increases the volume of a high-frequency sound, causing Reese's heart to stop. He leaves, thinking she's dead. However, Reese wakes up and escapes. Jude and Sophie go to Reese's location, where Jude finds Reese overpowering guards. As they prepare to leave, Vivek holds Sophie hostage. Jude and Reese lower their weapons, but Jude reveals a hidden gun and Reese uses it to shoot Vivek. Before dying, Vivek gives Reese the location of Leah. Reese helps Sophie sit, and they find themselves in Sophie's lab. Reese destroys the vial containing the formula Sophie had created. After Reese leaves, Sophie injects herself with her backup solution and recovers from her condition. However, she collapses in Mason's arms shortly after. Jude and Nestor gather the equipment needed for Diana to complete a machine that will erase all data about the survivors. Before they proceed, Jude asks Nestor one final time if he's sure about joining him, and Nestor shows determination to save the survivors' lives. Marshall brings more materials for the device to Nestor, who thanks him and tells him to leave. However, Marshall insists that it's his destiny and shows Nestor a locket with Hannah's picture inside. Realizing that Nestor won't let him stay, Marshall departs. Diana continues working on the device when Jude's laptop receives a notification about Naomi's group, including Grace, her wife. Diana rushes off to find Grace immediately, but Nestor convinces her to finish the device before leaving. At the same time, Marshall arrives at the camp demanding to see Hannah. He punches Roy Aronson, and the HSI agents restrain and arrest him. As they leave, Roy discovers a note hidden in Marshall's pocket, realizing the imminent danger they face. Jude and Reese arrive at Jude's house, where Nestor informs them about Diana's decision to leave and the completion of the device. Caleb talks to Leah, who is staying with him in his cabin. Leah expresses her fears about their uncertain future, but Caleb reassures her that everything will be all right. Roy arrives at Caleb's cabin, warning him about the danger Craig has imposed on them and their fellow survivors. Meanwhile, Craig has Lydia Doyle torture Marshall in another part of the camp. Nestor drives his police car through the HSI gate, and after Craig talks to the survivors, he meets Nestor. Nestor demands custody of Marshall, who had gone to the camp the previous evening. As Marshall is brought out of a cabin, Roy Aronson secretly hands him a note. Nestor and Marshall leave the camp, confirming their objectives. Caleb has gathered the survivors, and Reese has entered the camp using the police car. Caleb meets Roy in a secluded part of the camp, waiting for Reese to arrive. Once she does, they discuss their roles in the plan and put it into action. After eliminating all the guards, Reese throws a radio to Jude, who uses it to taunt Craig. Craig orders a search after finding the guards tied up in a cabin, but they find all the cabins empty. Craig then orders them to track the signal of the radio Jude used. The survivors stay inside Naomi's cabin, where Leah reads the writings on the wall and comments on a pattern she noticed. Hannah tells Leah to remain silent, and Caleb calms down Thomas, who starts to panic. Meanwhile, Jude and Nestor wait outside the camp for the power to be cut from the electrical fences. Marshall arrives with the good news of acquiring a bus. Roy successfully cuts the power by opening the container van housing the camp's power generators. Jude and Nestor then cut through the fence. Some HSI agents track the signal of Jude's radio, but it gets stuck on the fence. Jude and Nestor make their way in and part ways, as Jude's objective is to wipe out the data about the survivors using Diana's device. Craig and Lydia Doyle detain Roy in the server room, while Jude reaches the survivors and leads them towards the breach they made. Reese and Leah are finally reunited, and Jude proceeds to the server room to complete his objective. Inside, Jude confronts Craig and Lydia at gunpoint. Lydia reveals she has a weapon pointed at Roy's head, causing Jude to lower his gun. Craig picks it up. Outside, Hannah holds the fence to allow people to pass through, but when the power comes back on, she gets electrocuted. Reese quickly pulls her away. Craig shoots Lydia to ensure she's dead. As Roy leaves the room, Jude and Craig have a conversation. Caleb carries Hannah, who manages to recover, while Marshall smiles with relief. Jude shows Craig Diana's device, and Craig, as one of the people from the future, makes the final decision. Jude wakes up from a bad dream where Apex controls his family. Nestor reminds him of a court proceeding they need to attend. Jude gives his statement to the court, claiming he barely knew Craig and had no idea where he was. After leaving the court, Jude and Nestor feel relieved. Jude drives to a safe farm and hands Caleb and Hannah their new identity papers. Although they haven't found Rebecca yet, Jude assures Caleb that he will keep him informed. Before leaving, he gives Caleb a piece of paper. Reese and Leah arrive and inform Jude about his potential involvement in Naomi's scheme. Caleb goes to a university and reunites with his daughter, Rachel, in an emotional encounter. Meanwhile, Greta Pryor and her associates plan their next move since they can no longer contact Craig. Greta orders Drew to track and neutralize Dr. Sophie Forbin. At the police station, Jude and Nestor set new objectives as Roy brings evidence to the lockup. When Drew arrives at the hospital, he finds Sophie unconscious on a bed. Before he can inject her with a presumed poison, Sophie grabs his arm and breaks it. She leaves her room, and a nurse discovers Drew on the floor. The film comes to a close as Sophie walks away, her eyes displaying a strange color.